I'm doing this with one hand, so please excuse the shaky camera. But basically what I do is I take the thread from the top spindle and loop it around all the loops and hooks that are required. Your machine will have accurate threading instructions, but generally it goes like this. If a hook is not there, move your hand wheel until it pops up and then you can put the thread through it. Then bring the thread back down again to place around behind the metal arm or arms, depending on what your needle looks like. This shot isn't the best, but I'm using the pull down mechanism that came with the machine to thread the needle. Otherwise, if threading the needle by hand, make sure you go through the front of the needle so that way the thread comes out through the back of the needle, and then place the thread all the way to the back. Every machine has some kind of threading system for winding the bobbin. This is to create a little tension so that way the bobbin threads nice and tight without any loose threads. In my machine, I wrap the thread around a spring-loaded washer like this. Then I put the thread through the holes from the inside out. Place the bobbin on its holder and activate the bobbin mechanism. On my machine, all I have to do is push the bobbin over, but on your machine, it could be pulling out the turn wheel or flipping a switch on the front. Once it's on, hold the thread and hold your pedal down. After a couple of rotations, you can clip the thread and continue threading the bobbin. When the bobbin is full, it will usually stop on its own, and then you can deactivate the bobbin mechanism. On my machine, I feed the bobbin on top, but yours may be underneath. Either way, the same rules I'm about to explain will apply, no matter what machine you have. Place your bobbin into its case. If there's a hook in the case, that means you need to feed the bobbin thread through it like this and place to the back. Generally, the thread should be pulling in the opposite direction that the bobbin spins. You can just leave the thread hanging out as we move to the next step. Next, make sure your needle is threaded and that the thread is long enough and placed to the back. Holding your needle thread and using the hand wheel, do one rotation so that the needle comes down and the inside mechanism loops around the bobbin thread. When the needle comes back up, give a slight tug on the needle thread and it will bring up with it the bobbin thread through the sewing hole. You may have to jiggle the hand wheel a little if it doesn't come up easily, or you may need to use a pencil or seam ripper to pick up the bobbin loop that's poking up through the sewing hole. When it's all done, you should have 2 threads coming from the sewing area. One from the needle and one from the bobbin. Let me show you again from a different angle. As you can see, I am turning the hand wheel slowly once as the needle thread loops around the bobbin thread. Watch my other hand as I gently pull the thread through. Don't move quickly or with aggressive movements. If the thread is catching, just rotate the hand wheel a little until the thread releases, but don't make a second full rotation. To avoid making mistakes, it's usually best to do a quick test stitch before you sew your actual pieces. So take some scrap pieces of the fabric you're using and adjust your stitch length and tension. Normal stitch length is about 2 to 2 to 5 or the middle of the scale. But if you're sewing heavier fabrics, you'll want a higher stitch length and a looser tension. If you want to sew something with a little extra security and perhaps something around a tight curve, then you'll want to reduce to a smaller stitch length, and you might want to increase the tension slightly. Make sure you have the correct stitch type. For this example, I'm going to do a straight stitch. Make sure to push the 2 threads to the back, one coming from your needle and one coming from your bobbin. Gently place your fabric in place so that the edge of the seam lines up with your required seam allowance measurement as instructed in your pattern. Once in place, pull the lever at the back to put the presser foot down, placing pressure on your fabric so it won't move. Then do your test stitches. Once done, clip the threads using the blade on your machine or scissors. When that's all done, you'll want to do a check on your seams. You want to make sure that the threads are clean on both sides and that there's no bunching or weird gaps. Check the looseness of your seam. If there's a lot of gaps in between the two fabrics, then you need to increase your tension. If the threads are clean and not bunching and the seam is nice and tight without gaps, you're ready to start sewing for real.